Well, I wanted to do a video and just noticed that I actually have my Dreamer T-shirt on from the project of the community of Sant'Egidio in Africa against AIDS, which I think is still going on. But I wanted to do a video just to stay on top of my channel and the subscribers, etc., and just to try to share some of my reflections on what I've been thinking and some of the thoughts that I've been having and some of the reading that I've been doing. And the topic is going to be like a twofold topic. One is to again explore and go over how human beings are wired to believe and to order their world, and to make sense of it, and they tend to ignore or deny or suppress what doesn't fit into a comfortable view of things. So that's where you have repression in Freudian psychoanalytic theory. There are sensations and experiences too painful to remain in consciousness, especially in children. And so then you suppress, you repress, uh, you kind of push into the unconscious or maybe subconscious these experiences. But this energy doesn't disappear just because you hit it. It continues to work surreptitiously, unconsciously, below the threshold of your consciousness. And that's where you get into therapy and try to, through various methodologies, bring them out and deal with them in the open. It's like puncturing a pustule or a blister or something where the pus needs to come out. So we're wired to believe, and we're wired to have hope. I think that as part of evolution, we are wired to look forward to the next step and to be optimistic about the future. I was thinking about this yesterday again. I like to watch real crime shows, not because I like crime or violence at all, but I am fascinated with the police work that is done in catching the murderer, typically. And I like it especially sometimes when it's uh, caught on video with video cameras, and they have to canvas a whole bunch of video cameras and all kinds of things. And then it's an incredibly intrinsic work, and sometimes the police doesn't do the job that they should. But the interesting thing about that is that a family who has had a loved one murdered, could be a child, could be whatever, tremendous pain. Once that occurs, they go into mourning, etc. Then they get into the gear of finding the culprit. And then they get into the mode of following the legal procedures, hopefully for conviction of the culprit. And many times you'll see, and I've been watching this great series, six-part series, Mind Over Murder, on six defendants from this place that I would pronounce Beatrice, but they pronounce it Beatrice, which to me is an indication of, I don't know, the cultural level of this town. I don't think is very high. But in any case, I think a very cocky, and I think the producer of the show thinks so too, and I obviously am influenced by what she has presented, a very cocky policeman who wasn't even assigned to the case took it upon himself to solve the case, very cocky, and he rounds up these 6 people, at least one of whom is, with all due respect, common knowledge in the program, mentally deficient, unable to actually narrate. And she was fed information in the interrogation by this policeman. And then she came up with that she had dreamed that she had been present when they raped this older woman and maybe stole stuff from her and murdered her. And there are indications as to who really did it, but in the scheme of things, they arrested 6 people and they spent, I think, almost 20 years in prison with no DNA evidence, no kind of evidence, nothing. And then finally they were exonerated and millions of dollars had to be paid. But the families of the family of this lady, once they make up their mind that the police, with their authority and all this kind of stuff, have arrested, and then the prosecution, this very bad prosecutor who prefers to have notches on his gun, so to speak, than seek the truth. In fact, he overlooked the opportunity for DNA analysis that was offered to him, etc. Didn't divulge this to the defense. All kinds of errors. But the family of the victim, once they, in their heads, made up their minds that they had the right people, to unconvince them that in fact they had gotten the wrong people, and that this was basically now proven and now established in the courts with decisions and reversals, etc. It took a lot of effort, and the ending of this series is that a very interesting playhouse group of actors from this town, Beatrice, dramatized the investigation and what they went through. One of the guys was raped in prison, etc. A very gentle man. Horrible suffering on the part of these falsely accused. With this dramatization of the investigation and what happened, at least one of the family members, very reluctantly and with great difficulty, came around to the idea that what we had believed for so long, that they had gotten the right people, we didn't have to worry about who done it anymore. See, the mind seeks to relieve the tension of uncertainty, and even if and the actual evidence or some other kinds of real investigation and thought into, are we sure that we know what we want to believe, etc. This kind of stuff doesn't happen very much. We want to hope, but again, the interesting thing is that you go step by step, and then even though a horrible loss has happened, you move on to another step, which is finding the killer. Then you move on to, oh, they found the killers, let's see the trial now. Oh, they sentenced them, that's some closure there. And then all of a sudden you have further investigation and they find out that they had the wrong people. Now you have to redo your whole adaptation again. It's very, very tough. And so what I've been thinking about is that we do want to believe, and people can believe anything. You can believe that Joseph Smith found gold tablets somewhere. You can believe the angel Gabriel dictated the Quran to Muhammad. You can believe, God spoke to Moses. You can believe Jesus was the Son of God, incarnate in the flesh, etc. And I want to talk a little bit about, from a Christian point of view, what we can end up doing to try to get a grip on how things are working faith-wise. so that we are wired to believe. And these are very trying times. And I'm reading various things. I'm reading Nehru's autobiography of the years in the 30s, especially under British domination. So the British come into India. They set up, the East India Trading Company, all these companies, and then they get in there to rule the country, basically because of their financial interests. I'm also reading a big history of Cuba, and it's the very same thing. Uh, the United States basically wrests Cuba away from Spain, and they get in there and they say, we are going to keep, put law and order in the island. And until we determine that the Cubans are able to govern themselves, etc., we're going to be here with a military presence. And my only point in saying this is that what I read and what I observe and observe is how the powerful lorded over everyone else. And today, one of the worst, it's happened since day one, but today I'm more and more struck by how the powerful wreck brains, destroy capacity to think, and just lie to people who believe it. And the prime example is Trump and the 30% of the people that believe he won the election when not even he believes it, or if he does, Attorney Barr said he has to be detached from reality. But all his intimates are coming out now and saying, no, we knew that there was no basis for this. But some people cannot accept the fact that their idol, and maybe Trump, who is his own idol, can't accept the fact that he was not voted for the second term. And this is a tremendous crime, and it just goes to show how belief works, even in the face of all kinds of evidence that disproves your belief. And so as I read about Nehru and Cuba and all these other places, and I see that the actual world is being destroyed, the planet, you see this horrible suffering of the floods and the droughts and the fires and the heat killing people. And then you have this distraction of the abortion thing. I was reading Harper's Magazine. This woman said, I was raised very religiously, and we were taught in church everyone had to go out and vote. And the only thing you needed to think about for the candidate was he anti-abortion and was he anti-gay rights? If the candidate was anti-abortion and anti-gay rights, you voted for him. You've simplified everything to the point of absurdity. You're not going to eliminate homosexuality. You're not going to eliminate abortion. But if you make it a crime, you get this badge. It's like the ticket to heaven of these people that you accepted Christ to go to heaven. That sort of thing. So I'm really overwhelmed, as so many people are, with all the suffering in the world. And so I begin to think about, why did God create us? He created a beautiful planet. He created, human beings emerge from this evolutionary process. But in the very process itself, survival of the fittest, etc., you have hunters. Animals hunt. It's written into the nature of creation. Lions are going to kill their prey. Tigers, leopards. In Isaiah, you're going to have a prophecy, you can call it a dream, of a vegetarian lion. The lion will eat hay like the ox. Vipers won't harm you. In fact, the idea is that in the beginning there was no such violence in paradise, but because of sin, things became topsy-turvy. The beasts rule over Adam, mankind, and this will be reversed in the 7th chapter of Daniel, when one like a human being or one like a son of man coming in the clouds gets all the dominion that previously somehow had been usurped by the beasts that come out of the chaotic sea. And then all the nations and tongues, etc., will worship this Son of Man, etc. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and all nations and tongues will adore him, etc. It's always in the future. Now, Jesus came to lived on the earth, and the Gospels referred to him as the Son of Man in many occasions. Mark, I think, has 7 uses of Son of Man in relation to the predictions of the Passion. He's got some other Son of Man in chapter 2 where he forgives sins, etc. But basically speaking, the Son of Man must suffer and be mocked, and after the 3rd day rise. And so the Christian belief is that, yes, historically, empirically, what you can observe is that Jesus was a good man with, hosting meals and healing people and teaching people and denouncing the powerful, denouncing the rich. Woe to you, rich. Softened perhaps in the Matthean Beatitudes, which don't have the curses, woe to you rich, woe to you who laugh now, etc. And of course, he's going to come into conflict with the authorities. Like, hello, that's what happens all the time. And he gets arrested, and he gets mocked, and he's abandoned by all his disciples. But then he rises from the dead, or is risen from the dead. And now you have these followers of his who had loved him so much, as Josephus says, believe in him, and they have tremendous courage to follow Jesus. But nevertheless, one could ask oneself, uh, obviously there is an experience of Jesus which coagulates or puts in cohesion a whole view of things, including that of the Bible, the Old Testament, and you now understand the scriptures, just like in the Emmaus story. Jesus explains all the scriptures and things that were not at all clear in the Old Testament, that the Messiah had to suffer, as Luke 24 says. All these things now are looked at in a different light. And so now you have a coherent view of things, where you explain evils as tests that God makes. The Book of Wisdom talks about the righteous person being tested like gold, etc. You have phrases in Corinthians, God will not test us beyond our strength. So you have all these, sort of power of positive thinking type stuff. I'm reading Seneca too, Stoic. And Seneca believes that the Logos, which governs nature, is perfect. And if we align ourselves with the Logos and accept what is, then we can deal with the blows that fortune may give us in the right way. And you don't fear death, because death is a natural thing that happens. And in fact, you can decide when you are going to die. So the Stoic philosophy is basically atheistic. There's some lip service to the gods, etc. But basically speaking, it's this perfect logos, the word, if you want, or the reason behind, all the laws of the universe. And if we can adapt and conform ourselves to that, then it's a solution to your suffering and to your fear. A lot like Buddhism. Buddhism is, follow the Eightfold Path. All life is suffering. You can overcome suffering by following the Dharma, following this right conduct type of thing. So humans are always trying to cope with reality. And nowadays we have gone through the ringer with COVID and the war in Ukraine and all the political fighting and all the shootings. So the same people that say vote for anti-abortion, anti-gay, anti-gun is not part of this. That's where it gets a little complicated. So you have daily shootings, mass shootings, and this is, of course, indicative of a very unhappy, divided, isolated, a nation where people can become very isolated and desperate. And then with the media and publicity and popularity, or at least, like Oscar Wilde said, if I can't be famous, I'll be notorious. You get your 15 seconds of fame by shooting kindergarten children or grade school children. And this apparently is not a shocking thing to lead certain politicians to action. They will, in their belief system, like everybody else, they will do everything it takes to explain this away because, Jesus, babies, and guns, or some other simple slogan that appeals to a mass of people, not the watchers of these videos, I don't think, a mass of people that have reduced their thinking and have let emotions take over to that extent. And that's why we're in the deep doo-doo that we are in. And so, we have to be aware that we are wired to believe, we want to believe, and what I think as Homo sapiens we should do is examine our beliefs and like the Hippocratic Oath, at least do no harm. And then after that, you could probably maybe dream about a perfect state that is going to come, maybe after death. So this picture here, of course, is in a way the whole drama. You have very corrupt countries in Central America. The United States played a big role, the United Fruit Company and many other places. They did coup d'etats in Guatemala. They put Arbenz in power. They've supported Somoza in Nicaragua. And one of the things that is now very popular, especially in the state of Florida, is don't talk about bad things. Don't criticize America. Don't have any static in our beautiful rosy picture of how good we are. This is a prime example of belief contrary to evidence. The Pope has gone to Canada to apologize for horrible, horrible treatment of Native peoples in Canada who were handed over to the church. I've heard, maybe unwed mothers had their children taken away, and then the children were sold or at least placed with adoptive families. And some people may say the church should not never apologize. John Paul II apologized for the Shoah, the Holocaust, and everything. You cannot have reconciliation and truth without the humility to apologize. I need to do it with my siblings. Other people husbands need to do it with their wives, vice versa. Suppression, repression, hiding your head in the sand doesn't heal a thing. It's a temporary fix, like a drug. So the story of Central America, like the story of Cuba, has a lot to do with politics and opportunism and the strong helping the strong, basically, and exploiting the weak. And so you have, you know, even climatic changes there. And what you have is then, like the Holy Family in Matthew, there's persecution by Herod. He's killing all the children in Bethlehem, and the Holy Family has to emigrate to Egypt and then come back and decide where they're going to settle in Matthew. And they decide not to go back to Judea because Herod's son is reigning. So they choose Nazareth, which had been the place all along in Luke, etc. I'm reading The Birth of the Messiah, Raymond Brown, and when you read this book, and I've read a lot of biblical studies, but the thoroughness of this guy is incredible. I mean, that people could devote that much energy and brilliance and care to every minute detail. But what I was also thinking about today is very interesting. I'm reading a book called Judaisms and Their Messiahs at the Turn of the Christian Era, and it's plural, Judaisms. I mean, some people have students and people that ask me, what did the Jews think about? And I go, what are you talking about? You know, what do the Cubans say about Castro? What do the Cubans say about the embargo? Or what do the Cubans vote? You know, Cubans are not like a monolith. You know, that's only for people that don't know the devil is in the details, as they say. You have to think and observe. Just like the things that we like, we observe. We choose the apples we like. But the things we're not that interested in, we just lump it all together. So I'm reading now towards the end of the book by a giant. I have to call him a giant, I think, James Charlesworth, who's not Jewish, talking about the literature that didn't make it into the Bible but was around in the atmosphere at the time of Christianity in the beginning. And this is the second book of Baruch. And it drew my attention. It's not the only such passage, but this is a very interesting passage. There's a description of the Messiah's kingdom in this book, Second Baruch. The Messiah is a militant figure. He's going to overcome the last leader. I assume that's Rome. But look what it says. The joy will be revealed and rest will appear. It's a paradise redivivus, you know, sort of a come back to life of the Garden of Eden, which is typical in eschatology. The end corresponds to the beginning, so you don't just hope for some great new creation that God's going to do, but you have a basis on which to sort of base yourself in that in the beginning was all very nice until we, human beings, lump us all together, sinned and brought in the beast being over man rather than man over the beast. One of the expressions that has come to my head is these last few periods that we explain away everything. Nehru talks about this, you know, when he talks, I don't have the book here with me, talks about divine providence. Everything is explained. It's a test. Just wait. It'll get better. God is there. He's present. The footprints. You only saw one set of footprints because he was carrying you. I call that, in a way, humans doing all the heavy lifting. You know, I even had the blasphemous thought, God doesn't do windows, that sort of thing. But listen to this. There will be no illness, fear, or tribulation. No one will die untimely. All unpleasant things will be no more. The wild beasts will come out from the wood and serve men, and the asps and dragons will come out of their holes to subject themselves to a child. Woman will no longer suffer the pains of giving birth, and workmen will no longer struggle to provide food because the products of themselves will shoot out speedily during the time that they work on them in full tranquility. In Amos, you have the hills distilling wine. And I put in the margin there, dream. It's a dream. You are imagining all this stuff. Now, getting back to Christianity, and one of the thoughts that I have as a Christian is that of Jesus as the faithful witness, or ho martus ho pistos, which really could almost be translated the trustworthy martyr. Because this word pistos in Greek can mean both faithful, Jesus was faithful to his mission, and can also mean trustworthy, worthy of faith. We can, validly put our faith in Jesus. So that in the book of Revelation, in the very first verses, he is called the faithful witness, and of course Psalm 89, probably the greatest messianic psalm there is, also has this expression that the Messiah, or David anyway, his line will last forever, his throne like the sun before me. He will maintain himself like the moon. I have put him as a witness, or a faithful witness in the sky. So that when I read all this religious stuff that I am reading, what really comes out is how much has been written in order to prop us up. Joan Didion, not a religious person, famously said, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." So that when I'm reading all this kind of stuff, more realistic guy, and he was a dreamer too. This Nehru guy was a socialist. He thought that Russia was pretty good, and machinery. And then Gandhi was the opposite. He criticizes Gandhi quite a bit. Gandhi didn't believe in machinery. Gandhi believed everybody should lead a very simple, ascetic life, poor life. No one should be richer than another, but everybody poor. Nehru thought that you needed to produce and raise the level of people. So he's a very rational guy, but Gandhi went off into this very mystical kind of philosophy and lifestyle. Although there's a saying, it costs a lot of money to keep Gandhiji living in poverty, because to have everything perfect, and his ground nuts and peanuts and all this kind of stuff, and to be spinning and all this kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't exactly you needed to sort of cater to what Gandhi, or respectfully Gandhiji, wanted. But the thing is that that all this stuff that I'm reading points to a couple of things. One is the history of the world is the powerful quashing the weaker. I mean, and today we even have a concentration of power and money in a very small number, but then enough, crumbs, so to speak, or enough really nice things too, come down enough so that some sort of equilibrium. But normally they kind of push you to the limit. Right now with the prices, I am sure it is not just, these are very honest and charitable companies, and they are forced to do every price increase in that amount because of the war in Ukraine, and the gasoline and all this kind of stuff. No, people exploit and take advantage. Look at the drug companies. I take a very expensive blood thinner. I applied to the financial assistance program for which I qualified financially according to their rules. I got my cardiologist involved. His office, they know how to do these things. And after all this effort, all this paperwork, they finally said, oh, you only sent us one sheet. And of course, you have to scrounge around again and talk to your cardiologist again and track down what happened. And then you finally get the right answer. Oh, no, we did get it all. It's not correct that you only sent one sheet. We did get everything, but now it's towards the end of the year. You got to start all over again for the following year. So they get to do their commercial and say, we can help if you have financial difficulty paying for our drug. It's beautiful publicity. But and I'm an ex-attorney, I know how to do these things. I have a cardiologist's office cooperating with me, and I don't get anywhere. You can imagine the typical situation is probably just BS. So I read the history of the world. I've read the history of medieval Rome, suffering and suffering because of greed and war and lying and hatred and destruction. And then you ask, where is God? And then you find texts like this one, the Second Baruch, where the heavy lifting leads you to dream of a time when every tear will be wiped away. Death will be no more. Sea will be no more, says the book of Revelation. The beasts are thrown into the lake of fire. And it does help quite a bit to believe these things, even to get into the spirit of the myth. I'm reading a very, very good book precisely on this by a great scholar, Paul Miniar, taught at Yale many, many years, The Bible and the Historian. And he's saying you have to read the Bible from the point of view of the liturgy and of the living faith community, not just like a dry exegete, kind of maybe Raymond Brown a little bit, and, splicing all these little, words and everything. You have to get into the rhythm and the spirit of these writings. And certainly it helps to pray, and I do pray, twice a day. It helps to practice the sacraments, etc. It helps to nurture this positive thinking faith thing. I go to bed every night. I talk to God. I talk to him honestly, though, like the Jews do, they put him on trial, etc. Convicted him on 2 counts, didn't take care of widows and orphans, and unleashed the lying spirit that fools the gullible. When is that more relevant than today? This is from the Joys of Yiddish by Leo Rostin. So that it helps to buttress your faith, feed your faith. But at the same time, and the but isn't a bad word, you are despoiled, you are deprived of your props. This is kind of like one of my videos, Dark Night of the Soul, Las Nadas, the nothings of St. John of the Cross. Seek nothing, want to, see nothing, etc. So that you have only faith and fidelity to God. And fixing your eyes on Jesus, this pioneer of our faith, letter to the Hebrews, the faithful and trustworthy witness, which is martyr in Greek. He was on the cross and said, my God, why have you abandoned me? Psalm 22, which ends on a victorious note. He finishes the mission that God entrusted to him, his Father. He voluntarily, apparently let himself be arrested and did not deny or try to get out of it. So as far as a human being is concerned, Jesus did everything possible to be coherent with his faith that this was God's plan and God was his father and he was God's special only begotten son, and his mission was to save his people by giving them an example and dying for them and then rising from the dead, and then we incorporated into Jesus, die with him in baptism and rise with him to a new life where sin doesn't have power over us. This is, in a nutshell, Christianity. And as Pascal would say, there's no loss in believing and living that. There could be a great loss in not believing and living that. Even in this world, in other words, Christianity induces the best sentiments and the most healthy attitudes and can really heal the world if practiced, just like I think maybe Judaism could do that, tikkun olam, to repair the world. But then, you have thoughts like this. Even Jesus talked about hell. So that God creates the world, he creates human beings, and with foreknowledge, he knows, according to some of these texts, and I read it even in Latin, one of these versions of these books, many are condemned, few are saved. So God basically started this experiment knowing that supposedly the great majority are going to be in torment forever. They didn't choose to be born. Who knows what happened to them? I was reading about Newman's. I'm reading Newman's Apologia pro Vita Sua. And he talks about when he believed in predestination, etc. As a child, 15-year-old, he had a conversion, etc. And then I talked to a lot of people and I asked them, do you believe in hell? They say no, because the idea that God could allow someone to be in torment forever and ever and ever and ever, you kind of question what kind of God is that? Can I love a guy like a God like that, or do I just have to like it and lump it or something? So there are questions, and this questioning, I think, is healthy because, as I said, what we have is a lack of questioning and a lack of ability to question effectively. Nothing is to be a doubter and a skeptic, a guy that dismisses evidence because he doesn't believe anything. But the other thing is to accept things, act critically without exercising any judgment. That's what criticism is. Kritikos is the judge. And questioning, what kind of religion uh, do we believe in, and how can we deal with religious texts, and this is a big emphasis that I've been reading about, as art, which are not to be taken literally, but yes, to be taken seriously. But how do you do this? And it's a lifelong exercise. But Jesus, if we fixed our eyes in him, we would have a human being from history that did things a certain way. And it is true, he does talk about fear him who can cast you into Gehenna, and which I think many scholars would say that's an exhortative saying. It's saying take it so seriously that you should follow the right path, uh, as if the consequences of not are horrible. The book of Daniel and the book of Isaiah at the end talk about this deraon, this unique word of shame and confusion. In the book of Daniel, in the resurrection passage in chapter 12, Many who sleep in the dust of the earth, in the dust of the earth shall awaken, some for eternal life, and others for uh, ignominy, for an eternal horror, or thereon. And this other, this word is used only in one other place in the Bible, and that would be in Isaiah, the very last line of Isaiah, which is in the synagogue. It's reversed. They put it next to last. It's so nasty. Their worm will not die. Okay, and going out, they will see the corpses of those who rebelled against me. Their worm shall not die, nor will their fire be quenched, and they shall be the Deraon of the whole world. So that you have this very serious language, just like the Bible uses slaying dragons in the sea and drying up the sea, and Rahab and the serpent and Leviathan and all this stuff. This is all poetic language to get us to grasp, or to be impressed with and inspired by, to paint a big mural like the Sistine Chapel of the Last Judgment, and that gives us the panorama of how broad this and deep this whole thing is supposed to be. But we still have to, I think and answer for ourselves, and be very careful about simply saying and even amen, amen, especially to men and others who you have to kind of have a sort of hermeneutics of suspicion in many cases, simply because I think it is our duty as Homo sapiens, man, the knower, even the wise, to exercise our critical judgment, our discernment of spirits, and our discernment of truth, and distinguishing it from lies. And so I just wanted to share some of those reflections. I read these things, and I've gotten into this kind of furrow with it. And I'm on a journey like everyone else. And hopefully these videos will be of some interest or help to those who see them.